Welcome to the Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition, where we keep you up to date with everything going on in the ColdFusion community. We'll share the latest news on events, releases to engines, frameworks, libraries, and tools, as well as spotlighting quality content from the community. Welcome to another Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition. It's September 15th, 2020. And I'm happy to have Brad Wood with me today.
I'm happy to be here with you today, Gavin.
Well, it's a lot better than the last few days, I'll tell you that much. We were just talking before the show about how bad my weekend was with server problems, and then I didn't tell you that Monday had 2 more sets of server problems, different servers, different headaches. So I'm done with servers.
This is why serverless, even though it's a lie, is such a good marketing thing, because you know, developers, and you mentioned servers, their eyes like glaze over and they're like, just like Helsinki, you know, sorry, a man who knew too little reference. But yeah, you're like, what? Serverless? A world with no servers? It really just means somebody else manages the servers, but it's playing on that deep dread that, you know, developers have of having to manage the server and the hard drive goes out, etc.
Yeah, there's definitely some good things about it. I was actually looking at the DigitalOcean managed databases, but unfortunately there was a problem with one of the databases I had. It didn't meet some of the lockdown criteria they had, so I couldn't even import the first database. So I need to experiment on that. I'll tell you later who I can blame for it, but anyways.
So what do we got going on today?
Well, before we get into it, let's thank our sponsors, Ortus Solutions. They pay the bills, so thank you guys. Ortus Solutions obviously does a lot of things, open source projects, but we also do some training. So with trainings coming up, that's one way you can give back to Ortus and say thank you for all the open source goodness we give you. We have 2 ColdBox trainings coming up in October. I'm doing ColdBox Zero to Hero, and then Lucee is doing Hero to Superhero.
Now, didn't we just do these a couple months ago?
Yep, but they're in demand. Everyone wants to do them, and you know, obviously summertime. People are actually vacationing sometimes. I don't know how, but so there's more people signing up for the new ones, and we're going to try and offer them a few times a year. Normally we would do them around the conference time, but we're not there, so this is why we're doing it this way.
That's right.
So, yep. So normally we'd be at CF Summit, partying it up in the suite in Vegas, but
no, I missed that this year.
Yeah, no penthouse for us. So, anyways, but we have those 2 workshops coming up, and CFCasts is our subscription service, which has free and paid content released every single week. So, definitely check those out. And then if you're wanting to support us in a different way, we have Patreon support as well. So patreon.com/ortussolutions. You can see all the cool packages and different ways you can financially support us. We have about 31 patrons right now, and we're about 60% of our support of the podcast. So we're over 50% from Patreon, so that means it's paying more than Ortus does for the podcast, so that's a good thing. So Ortus can spend more of its money on open source products and stuff like that. So...
Sweet.
Okay, now we can get into the news since we've thanked our sponsors. So, probably the biggest thing of a piece of news I think for the week is that CFCamp officially canceled for 2020.
Such sadness.
Yeah, they wrote a nice little letter. It's on their website. If you go to cfcamp.org, you can see it. But I'll paraphrase and read a bit of it. But basically, they've been monitoring the pandemic situation since early in the year. And it seems for the foreseeable future, it's nearly impossible to run a proper physical conference event. And CFCamp is more than just 2 days of a bunch of tech sessions. They're a community conference driven by speakers and organizers, but also participants. So those things like chatting over lunch and during breaks or having a drink at the bar are all important parts of CFCamp, especially the dogs of CFCamp they had last year. You know, what could they do about that? So basically... in the current situation, they can't do it, and they don't want to do a bad job of it, and so that's sort of the short of it. And they did look at virtual as an option, but really, they think that it would, you know, there's a lot of other virtual conferences out there, and really, CFCamp is more than just a conference like that, so they decided to wait until next year.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. They said there's sort of oversaturation of online conferences, and everybody's kind of getting Zoom fatigue, so... Yeah. This is unfortunate, but not unexpected. I mean, it would be really difficult for, I think, the travel part of it. I think most of the U.S. people would would be unlikely or unable to travel there. So it really sucks, but I completely understand. Hopefully next year they won't have any loss in momentum. You know, when conferences take a year off, a lot of times you never see them again. But in this case, it's not a year off necessarily due to lack of interest or anything. It's just a kind of a forced timeout, if you will. But hopefully next year, people are so anxious to get back into the saddle of CFCamp, they'll just double the attendance. That's my projection.
Yeah, I know. I know the real reason is I told them I was going this year, so they decided to cancel.
Yeah, they're like, crap, Gavin's coming?
No, we don't want him here.
No, get rid of it.
Either that or my wife talked to them and said, hey, he's not allowed to go to Europe without me. Anyway, so
just bring her along. That's been my solution.
That's what I try to do. But as a
I've
teacher,
only gone 1 year without my wife and or some other part of my kids. I mean, it makes it more expensive, but then I don't have the whole "you ran off to Europe without me" thing that I have to deal with when I get home.
Yeah, and I mean that's what I was looking to do. But teachers don't have much vacation time. But it was looking like it was actually going to be right at Thanksgiving time, the week before, and so we could probably get away with that. But they have a rule that you can get PTO as a teacher, but you can't basically. No one can know why you're off or that you're off, so it would have to do no social media or anything.
Wait, no, why can nobody know why you're off?
Because you're not supposed to be vacationing. Personal time off is for emergency type stuff. Your vacations are vacations as a teacher.
I mean, I get it. Teaching is super important, but I mean, everybody's got a vacation. I mean, whatever. This has nothing to do with ColdFusion.
Yeah,
they can't solve all the world's problems here.
They think the 5 weeks they get off plus all of summer is enough.
Well, that would be great if everything you needed to do could be scheduled in that window, but
yeah. Well, that's the funny thing too is out of all the office workers and district administration, they're taking vacation now. I'm like, you had a summer too. You could have scheduled some of your time off then as well. Now you're back. Pandemic's in. Everyone's calling and sorry, half the office on vacation.
Dan Card says in the chat, support your local substitute teachers. Take PTO.
Yeah. I know it's funny. You don't even know how to sub right now because you got to give away all your Zoom access so your sub can get into your classes and stuff. So it's kind of they're like, how do we even do that? It's kind of
oh
crazy.
my, yeah. I have a house full of kids right now, all forced into online schooling, trying to figure out Zoom links and class schedules. It's an absolute mess, but
it's good times.
It's getting better. They're learning. Unfortunately, the teachers don't always even know how to operate Zoom, which makes it very interesting. But
yeah.
How about those Lucee updates?
Yeah, so I see that there was a problem fixed with the array each, and so that was some excessive memory usage. When you're using array each, it would basically duplicate the page context for each item.
Yeah, see here, I need to do some testing. I'm not sure. This is my ticket. I don't know if I'm ready to use strong verbiage like fixed in relation to this ticket. I think maybe it's been improved, but after several conversations with Misha proxied through Zach Spitzer, I'm still unclear on whether the ticket has actually been fixed to my liking or just smoothed over a bit. But basically what happens is, with the array each, also struct each and query each functions in Lucee, there's this amazing capability where after the closure, you can just pass true for the parallel flag. And instead of just iterating over serially, it spawns up by default 20 threads, and it iterates over them all in parallel, which can be just amazing for performance. What it's not amazing at is if you're looping, 40, 50,000 times, every single thread that's spun up clones the parent page context once for every time it loops. And so if you have 40, 50,000 items in the array, you clone the parent page context 40 to 50,000 times, which includes the entire servlet request object, which includes all the parsing of the form scope and then the uploaded variables. Everything all gets cloned, and it's extremely heavy. And the overhead that I've had at least 2 clients that have run into this, where the memory usage on our server just blows up because they're trying to do parallel processing. So obviously it was sort of a quick and easy implementation that was very wasteful. If there's only 20 threads, why are we cloning a page context more than 20 times? So this ticket was to address it. However, the ticket was sort of eased into with a couple we sort of vaguely improved it. I'm like, okay, no, but how about we fix it the way I said so? Unfortunately, that's a commonality on Lucee tickets is thank you for your improvement. However, I believe I was explicit in my ticket on how I expect you to fix it. I know nobody's obligated to listen to me, but I still try to make them. So I'll need to do some testing on this to see if it's really fixed to my liking. But I'm very happy to see that it's been improved upon again, because like I said, I have a couple clients and even my own personal use where I love the simplicity of the asynchronicity, but the duplication of the page context stuff just made it unusable within with tens of thousands of items. So
Yeah,
good
looks.
stuff though. Good stuff.
Yep, and it looks like they had a release candidate dropped as well for 5.7, sorry, 5.3.742, and then 5.3.8 was coming out.
Yeah, don't hurt yourself.
I know, sorry, trying to read numbers is hard.
James Moberg in the chat, to answer your question, you said is ACF like that or just Lucee? Adobe ColdFusion doesn't have the parallel flag on their array each, so there's no such feature in Adobe ColdFusion, which is a real shame because it is brilliant. It's a brilliant feature in Lucee. I absolutely love it. It's just dead easy to use, but there is no equivalent in Adobe ColdFusion. So now you may be asking if the CF thread tag in general duplicates the page context, and the answer is I don't know. Adobe ColdFusion is closed source, so I have no clue what they do. But yes, so for Lucee's kind of been stuck in a rut for like 6 months now or so. Well, no. It was June, July. Anyway, it's been a while. They've had Lucee 537 has been a release candidate, meaning typically release candidate means this is ready for production as long as we don't find any bugs. We're going to release it soon. And then Lucee 538 was the current snapshot builds of Lucee, but the 537 RC kind of just sat and like gathered dust and it never went stable. It never really went anywhere. So I know that Misha was working on fixing a few regressions that have been found, which is why they had the new 537 release candidate, the second release candidate, which was like, okay, now for real, we'll release this one. So I'm really hoping that comes out soon. Because it's just long in the tooth. There's fixes in that 537 RC that are months and months old at this point, and obviously, I mean 538 at this point should be close to an RC anyway. So
Cool.
good to see the activity.
Yep. Well, let's talk about Online CF Meetup. So last week, Charlie snuck in a meetup after we did the podcast. We didn't even announce it. But this week, we're just in time. So this Thursday...
Just in time. That's a TV show, right?
Yeah. So this Thursday, September 17th at 12 Eastern, we have a special Getting the Band Back Together episode. So we have using CF APIs with the Jamstack, with some names you might recognize: Raymond Camden, Brian Rinaldi, and Dan Wilson.
What is the Jamstack?
Jamstack, that's the thing Ray's been working a lot with lately. So it's the JavaScript, Angular, Mongo stack, I think.
Why is this relevant to ColdFusion developers?
Because it's using CF APIs with the Jamstack. If you listen to the first half, you'd find out.
No, I didn't. I was going through the docs highlighting all the tweets we're going to talk about.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, some of the people that used to work in ColdFusion all the time, and they're basically presenting on, how to integrate ColdFusion APIs with these features. But, yeah, it's kind of strange, people move away and do different things, and, you see them coming back. Dan Wilson's helping Charlie try and get the Online CF Meetup moving. And so
which I really appreciate. I've loved seeing all the new content on there, and so props to Dan Wilson for doing that. I know it hasn't all been like hardcore ColdFusion, but I mean, that's fine as long as it's applicable to the community. So I'm loving seeing it back in the saddle again.
Yep, and then so that one's going to be this Thursday, and they're actually doing a live stream on YouTube for it for the first time. Normally they just do, they were using Adobe Connect, now they started using Zoom, so now they're using StreamYard to do streaming it that way. So pretty interesting.
I think that's probably a good direction.
Yeah, I mean
anything that makes it more accessible, and
for sure.
I don't think you can get much more accessible than a YouTube stream.
Exactly. And then, so last week we did miss Charlie's. We didn't have the announcement. I think it went out right after the show. But September 10th at 12 Eastern, Charlie did differences between CF Enterprise and Standard Edition, more than you think. So this is a really good one for those people who are like paying for Enterprise and they wanted to maybe downgrade to Standard, but they want to make sure they can do what they need to do and don't get burnt for it. So Charlie went through all of it and explained how it all works. And
yeah, it's kind of funny because you said it was good for people paying for Enterprise to know what they had. I actually heard from a client that we work with that I think has some standard licenses, and he was actually a little pissed at the limitations he had with standard. But it was sort of moot because he's on his way to Lucee, so
Yeah.
those were no longer going to be limitations. Some of the big stuff was like threading. He had tried, he was really excited about CF thread, and he's tried to jump on it and use it, and then was like, "What? I only get a handful of CF threads that can execute at once. What the crap?" And so he just didn't even try to use the feature.
Yeah.
But anyway.
No, that's a really good session though, because over time things change too. A lot of things started out in enterprise and they moved them down to standard and vice versa. So
that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, a lot of people can't name the differences or can't name any differences. So it was a good session to let people know what the differences are. And it's like, why would I pay more for enterprise? Well, this is why. This is what you're paying for. So
yep, exactly. And so the recording is available on YouTube with the rest of the playlist. So we'll share that for everybody in the chat room, or you can wait for the show notes. Okay, and then I'm actually presenting on building an API with Online CF Meetup. The date, I think, is going to be October 2nd, but it hasn't been released just yet. So hopefully they'll get that released, and I'll give you the links so you can go check it out and say you're coming. But
is it going to be a ColdFusion API?
Yes, it will be.
Okay, just checking.
No, it's going to be a two-part. I'm actually going to do another one in November, sort of building, working our way up to building APIs with ColdFusion and then building ColdBox APIs. So, going to sort of show them all the goodies they can do in just ColdFusion.
So you have the way not to do it, and then you had the way to do it.
Yeah, I was like, this is how you can do it, and this is how you can do it much easier, much better, basically.
I'm so biased.
Yep. And then I have another webinar too on the 25th of, so not this Friday, next Friday, I'm doing an Ortus Webinar. Modern ColdFusion, no more copy and paste. So
no more, none, not a bit.
Nope. So we're gonna show you some ways to improve your coding practices, use some best practices on, using dry code, don't repeat yourself, and trying to make your code more maintainable across a single project, but also multiple projects. So
we should come up with an acronym WET that means something as well. So your code can be dry and your code can be wet. What would it be? W-E-T. Need some suggestions in the chat.
Yeah, I'll have to think about that later.
Wild elephants. We'll work on it. We'll come up with something. It'll be good.
Oh, so Charlie said no. JavaScript API is a markup. So I wonder if that means it wasn't CFML related. Anyways, I don't know how that linked in.
All right, so Dan Card has one. WET could stand for wasted extra time. So you don't want wet code because it's wasted extra time. I like that. You should use that.
Yeah. That's pretty good, actually.
You want dry code. Don't repeat yourself.
Yeah.
There we go. From wet to dry.
I like that. We might have to patent that one. Copyright it, trademark it.
Watch out. Luis will have it trademarked in a domain bot before you know it.
Oh, okay. So Charlie was explaining, that Jamstack is Java APIs and markup. My bad. Or JavaScript APIs and markup. So, even better. Because, I was thinking, Anyway, that's what happens when I guess wrong. That's the beauty of an acronym, right? You can make it mean whatever you want. So, next up, though, we've got some updates on CFCasts. So, CFCasts is our content subscription service, and we offer some free content as well as some paid content. And this week, there are a couple of series that were released. So, my Supercharge Your VS Code environment, the first couple of videos have dropped there. So, if you want to see more about using VS Code, you can check out the intro and also the Getting Started with the CFML extension. So, there's a couple of videos there to get you going.
Nice.
And then build a blog with Quick. Eric is releasing a new series showing you how to actually build a blog using Quick, because a lot of people are wanting to find out more about Quick and how to use it. So he's released the first 3 there, so you can get the introduction to the series, getting started, and then displaying a list of posts. So
when he's done, he'll have content box rewritten in Quick. Is that the?
No, but that would be kind of cool. We've talked about converting it over to Quick. I know Luis is working on Content Box 5, and he's changing a lot of the Hibernate criteria queries into just QB, and that'll sort of bridge the gap when we're moving towards Quick later. So, so there's 5 new videos released since last week. So
I'm excited about your VS Code stuff. I was playing with VS Code the other day, kind of pushing the limits. I had some some SQL files that were gigabytes in size, but I couldn't even get an editor that would open. And so I tried VS Code, and VS Code will open like 4 gig text files. Now it's a little slow, which is understandable, but it actually worked without crashing. I was pretty impressed with how it handled it. It popped up as like, hey, you need to restart VS Code with more memory. And I'm like, okay, do it. And then it opened up the file. I'm like, dang.
Yeah.
Everything else I tried just fell on its face.
Yeah, I used to use Sublime for those types of things when I was really crunching huge logs and everything. Sublime was really low powered. I thought as an Electron app, VS Code might have a little more trouble, but it's nice that they gave you that option for more memory when you opened it.
I mean, like I said, it was slow, but I mean, it worked. And so I was like, that's pretty cool. All right, Evagoras has another wet acronym for us. Write everything twice. Or it could even be thrice. Write everything thrice. 3 times.
Interesting.
That's good as well. All right, keep them coming, guys. Keep them coming.
Okay, while you
What's
guys
next?
do that, let's get on some conferences here. So, as we mentioned earlier, Into the Box 2020 workshops. We have the 2-day workshop, ColdBox Zero to Hero, led by me. It's going to be October 8th and 9th. So, 2-day workshop. And then Lucee is going to be doing the ColdBox Hero to Superhero, October 22nd and 23rd. The events page is now up and running. So if you go over to ortussolutions.com/events, you can read more about these 2 sessions, and you can also buy tickets. Those tickets are available, and if you're using the podcast 10 code, you can save 10% off of our trainings there. So definitely remember that, podcast 10.
And those are not 1, but 2-day workshops. How many seats do we have available in each of those? Is it 10 seats?
I believe we're aiming for 10. 10 is a good number for these trainings, just so we can make sure we see everybody. It's even harder in Zoom.
I agree.
Normally we just kind of walk around behind you and snoop on you, make sure you're not on Facebook and that you're not struggling with anything, and we can help. You have to be a little more brave and say, I got a problem, and share your screen so we can see. And but it's a good learning experience too. This way even more so, because everyone can see your error and they can all learn. A lot of times when I help somebody, I'll usually tell everybody else what I just helped solve. But it's kind of good because if they're actually paying attention to the Zoom call as well, they can actually see the problem, see you work through it. And
yeah, we can just share their screen. Everybody can watch us work through.
Yeah, so I know some people are a little nervous, but I found the groups is actually been pretty good. Most people, are pretty good about sharing, and it does make a big difference. That's the big thing about these trainings, and that's why we still offer them in person like this, because we could give you the videos, and we're planning on doing the instructor basically recorded trainings, but they're not quite the same as that interaction, especially with as much hands-on as we try and do in these trainings. So
yeah.
Okay, so next up on the list, we have the jconf.dev. So just a reminder, that's September 30th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So if you go to jconf.dev, you can register for that. It is free, and there's lots of great Java content for that conference.
Did you say JSConf the first time?
Oh, if I did, I apologize. I mean jconf. There is a JSConf, but not this. Yeah, not this time. Okay.
There you go.
Next up on the list, we have Adobe ColdFusion Summit 2020, and that's going to be November 17th through the 19th. It's going to be online, and the admission is free. If you go to cfsummit.wevents.com, you can get more information on that, and they've actually updated the site with some more information. So let me show you that. So here, you can see that they've actually started to give you a glimpse of the speakers for 2020. So if you see all speakers, it looks like they've got the first 12 up there right now. And I'm not sure if that's the final lineup or if they're still picking recommendations for that.
Yeah, I saw Mark's tweet about having a topic accepted.
Yep.
Or Fat Panther, as he goes on Twitter.
Yep. So there's some sponsors up there already. Now the link to do the form for registration is not there anymore, but if you go to the page, it's still there. So I think it's closed, but if you're sneaky, you can still get to it, but you may be too late. So
you're talking about for speaker submission?
Yeah, speaker submissions. I'm sorry. Yeah, so the speaker submission, if you go /speakers, you can submit it. Speaker-application, you can submit the application, but they may ignore you because it's too late. So, but
Prepare to be ignored.
Yep, and they also have the Adobe ColdFusion Certification is online, so if you want to, you can actually go ahead and take that online and sign up. It's 50 hours of online videos, and they've got a multiple choice question at the end of
50
it.
hours, 50 hours.
Yep. But
That's
if
a lot
you,
of hours.
yeah, it is. If you go through the whole process and pass the test, you get a badge on the coldfusion.adobe.com forum site now. So next to your name, you have this pretty little badge, and you also get a nice certificate from Adobe. So they're doing a few extra things there. So we have a blog link and a registration link for that, so you can find out more about it in the show notes. And we already mentioned CFCamp is not happening in 2020. Hopefully it'll be back and better than ever in 2021. Okay,
Yep.
so let's get into the blogs, tweets, and videos of the week. So we got an interesting one here from Benedict to start, because the thing that really surprised me, to be honest, was right here. He says he's been feeling creatively blocked. So he's only got like 10 blog posts this week. So I'm not sure.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
What's wrong, man?
Yeah, exactly.
Really falling down.
He says that work's been taking a lot out of him, and some of the other blog posts that he has this week may be related to that. So basically, he just sort of wanted to do a little brain test, so build a little code cutter. So he wanted to build a Fluent API, not an actual Fluent API, but a Fluent, basically a builder. So he's going to basically build a URL builder. So do something like this: URL builder .with protocol .with host .with path with param, and so basically create something similar to the way sort of hyper works, but this is just a URL builder. So like build event in ColdBox or something like that. So it goes through the process of building out the function, the URL builder, and then all the different pieces to chain it, etc. So but he's using closures inside of it to actually build the different sub functions. So it's kind of interesting. But yeah, as he mentioned, it's just a fun little experiment. It's not super robust or whatever, but yeah, just sort of fun. It was interesting too, just sort of seeing how to use them with closures inside of the other functions. So
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking what he has here. It's kind of interesting because instead of just having a bunch of public methods on a component, he has a struct, which is the builder API, and then a bunch of UDFs shoveled in the struct. Interesting. I'm just curious, because I've never seen it done this way. We use a lot of builder patterns in ColdBox and Command Box, and typically it's just a CFC instance you create, and it just has a bunch of methods that all just return this. And so, you chain the methods together, and each intermediate method call just returns back the original CFC.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of JavaScript with Vue, how you got all these functions in a struct that has data and it has functions, and it's kind of, very JavaScript object-y.
Yeah, I'm just trying to decide if there's actually any benefit to having an intermediate struct that you return with the methods in it. I guess what's the purpose of the... I see. So he doesn't actually have a component instance then. He literally just has a URL builder method. Yeah, function, UDF, which uses the struct as the holder for the methods.
Yeah,
I guess it does feel sort of JavaScripty. If it was Java, it would absolutely be a class. If it was CFML, I guess you can do both. That's interesting. See, I would never really... I would just create the CFC. I wouldn't think to use a struct. But,
yeah.
it is definitely a cool thing. You can take a struct and just slap methods in it. The reason I don't typically do that is because I can't store state inside of a struct, which is why I'm actually kind of looking at this, trying to look to see what he's doing. Like, where is he storing it? Oh, I see. He's wrapping every function with a make fluent callback. Seems a little just overcomplicated.
Yeah, like I said, I think he's more trying to see if he could do it more than, than if you should do it. And he even says that in the last paragraph, like, I'm not recommending this, I'm just trying it out.
Because it's a really cool thing that you can take a struct in CFML, you can slap, UDFs into it, closures, whatever, and you can pass it around, you can call it and almost make it look like an object. But it would be cool if this in ColdFusion was a reference to the struct itself, if you're inside of a function, because JavaScript has a bit more kind of contextualization on that. You know, you can say this, and it's a reference to the object that the method lives inside of. In ColdFusion, you can't do that, which is why I don't ever just stick UDFs inside of a struct, because I can't, you know, there's no like shared storage, because it's not an actual like, you know, component instance. So for, you know, builder DSLs, it's usually a component instance that stores the state inside of it, you know, and the Fluent methods are more or less just setters, if you will. But yeah, so it appears that the way he's doing it, he's wrapping each one in a closure, which allows them to keep a reference to all the arguments that are passed in. Definitely kind of interesting.
Yeah, like I said, I like just the way bin is, okay, here's the problem. Let me turn it on its head and try hitting it from a different side. It just makes you think, and you know, that's one thing about ColdFusion. It's so dynamic. You can do all sorts of crazy things. You don't have to do it one way. And yeah, it makes me think. So next up, we have a tweet from Zach Spitzer, and he's talking about the CF thread documentation being updated. So he's gone through and done some work on this. It's always good when documentation gets updated.
Yeah, it didn't have a note, because he was talking to me about this in Slack. It didn't have a note that you could, it lists all of the top level attributes to the CF thread tag, but it didn't mention that you can pass in, obviously, any additional attributes of your own design, which flow through into the attribute scope. What's interesting is his initial version of that documentation update said to access it in the arguments scope. And I was saying, that's not right. It shouldn't be in arguments. CF thread's a tag. It should be in the attribute scope. And apparently, it's a behavior I wasn't aware of. In Adobe ColdFusion, you can't access the argument scope inside of a CF thread. But in Lucee, when you call CF thread in script, using the script syntax, any additional attributes you pass in are available in the attribute scope and the argument scope, which I think is a bug. I don't think that's right. I think Lucee's doing something sloppy inside and allowing you to access it through arguments, but it's not a method, so there shouldn't be an argument scope. It's a tag. There should only be an attribute scope. Anyways, interesting little discovery that we made on that. And I also had, I suggested to Zach, which he tossed in there, that it should be worth mentioning that the Adobe implementation of CF thread will pass by value, meaning it duplicates any complex object like CFC instances or structs or arrays that you passed in as the attribute to CF thread. And Lucee does not. It passes those through by reference. And I much prefer the Lucee implementation. It's potentially more dangerous, but infinitely more powerful, and doesn't have the potential of taking down your server because you're duplicating giant object graphs of CFCs without realizing it. Because I've talked to so many people that had no clue when they do CF thread, random input equals some CFC instance, that thing's having a deep copy performed on it before it's passed to the thread, which actually makes it harder to share state between the main page thread and the threads you're spinning off, because you can't share, you know, complex variables between them. This kind of falls in the category, in my opinion, of Adobe putting up like bumper lanes, like, oh, you guys aren't smart enough to be able to, you know, watch out for concurrency. Don't worry. Daddy Adobe will fix it. We'll just duplicate everything when we pass it into the thread. I'm like, no, why would you do that? Lucee doesn't do it, which is like, thank you, Lucee. Yeah. I want it duplicated. If I want to shoot myself in the foot, I will do so. In the meantime, quit duplicating crap, Adobe. But yeah.
Yep, for sure.
Good stuff.
Okay, next up we have a tweet from this guy, Brad Wood.
Loser.
But so apparently 2 more pull requests from the Ortus team got merged into the JBoss Undertow project. And one was a pretty large revamp of predicate logging that will benefit the command box users. I like your spelling of benefit.
Wanted to spell it wrong? Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
Get at that anyway. But so you want to tell us why that will benefit us?
It'll benefit you because I said so, dang it. No, so the next version of command box is actually been taking bloody forever to release, because this time, instead of waiting on Lucee like I usually am, I've been waiting on Undertow to merge this pull request, which will be part of Undertow 2.2, because we've added a new feature in command box 5.2, which lets you tap into the so-called predicate language in Undertow, in JBoss Undertow. And it's sort of a DSL, you will, a string that you can specify to add rewrites, to add security, to add, you know, special response codes, the kind of stuff that you do with, like, you know, mod rewrite or stuff like that. But instead of using the Tucky library like command box has used in the past, this is actually built into Undertow, and it's super fast and it's a lot easier to configure. And so we tapped into that in the latest version of CommandBox, but the logging to be able to troubleshoot it and debug it was severely lacking compared to what the Tucky library gave us. So I sent a giant pull request to Undertow that added a whole bunch of logging into the core of Undertow that you'll be able to activate and tap into in CommandBox. And I was actually kind of surprised the maintainers of Undertow. I mean, I touched like 120 files in the Undertow source code, and they really didn't have like any feedback at all. They were like, "Oh, looks good to me. Can you merge these commits into one?" I'm like, "Okay, that's all you need is just the commits squashed." I assume they read all the code I typed. I mean, I tested it; it works. So I was a little surprised how trusting they seemed to be. But anyway, it finally got merged after like 2 weeks of me harassing them on GitHub, like, "Hey guys, you gonna merge this?" And so it's gonna come out soon in Undertow 2.2. So that'll make 3 pull requests now that Team Ortus, because Miguel's been helping me as well, has been able to get into the core of Undertow. I actually have more code merged into Undertow right now than I do in Lucee, so
That's pretty cool.
take that to mean what you want. But
and I like how the pull request is pull 911. A bit of craziness there, but just a side note too, Charlie said that in CF 2016 they added a pass array by reference settable at the app level, which can control the passing arrays by reference or value, but he's not sure if that relates to threads or anyway. So,
yeah, I don't think that applies to the CF thread tag.
But it would be nice if they did some of that.
That just applies to passing them into functions and things like that. And it's worth noting here that Lucee and before that Rilo always, since version 1, always passed arrays by reference. That was one of those non-compatibility things that was done on purpose, and they had no intentions of changing. Of course, in 2016, it's still, I believe, defaults to being by value.
For backwards compatibility.
Toggle the flag. Yep.
Okay, well, next up we have another one from Benny Dell, and this is a little series he has on cookies. So apparently the first cookie wins when conflicting cookie names are used with different settings in Lucee. So he says a lot of things can go wrong when you do a production change messing with cookies, and that's what happened. And so, they got a little burned by unexpected behaviors. And basically, ColdFusion creates conflicting cookie names with different domain settings. And what they're trying to do is basically use a local.envisionapp.com to a projects.local.envisionapp.com. So they're going more specific. But basically, the way it works, the browser, it sends everything to the server, and the server uses a struct, and so, basically you can override those keys in the struct, and basically the first cookie wins. And so he was working through that issue and try to, have some reuse cases and everything.
Curious if this works the same in every browser.
Yeah, it's a good question. And so, yeah, I've had a lot of headaches with cookies lately, and they're not fun. But yeah, it's weird because you get headers saying, "Hey, create these cookies," but they're not always there, or like in the browser, they're case sensitive, but inside of ColdFusion, they're not, because ColdFusion is not case sensitive. So it's very interesting. Definitely want to read through this if you're messing with cookies and having some issues. But yeah, it'll basically show you the different ways that it sets up. But it looks like, first cookie wins, and it essentially will expire the other ones automatically.
Yeah, so we had two domain cookies, one on a subdomain and one on a subdomain, both of which applied to the page. The browser sends them both, and then Lucee kind of just picks one.
Yep.
So I'm curious if Adobe also picks the first one.
Yeah, that's
probably. I mean, because somewhere, in the bootstrapping code of Lucee and Adobe, is some code that loops over the actual, servlet request array of cookies or object of cookies, whatever it is, and builds the cookie scope out of them. And it kind of makes you wonder if they even handle cookies of duplicate names, or if it just depends on how the loop was written as to, which one actually ends up in the cookie scope.
Yep, and that leads us to the next blog post. This is, I think, earlier as well. accessing cookies with the same name in Lucee. So it talks about how ColdFusion basically, they'll collide and override each other because there's only one in the cookie scope. But if you use the get HTTP request data, you can get access to the HTTP headers and get access to more of that information. And so that allows you to get, all the details in there, and then you can go through and figure it out. And so,
Yeah.
uppercase, lowercase, all those things.
If you look at the, your debugging tab in your browser, all the cookies just come through as one giant string in a header called cookie. And all that, Lucee or Adobe ColdFusion is doing, honestly, it's being parsed by the servlet container first. But, that string's being parsed and then eventually bubbles down into the actual cookie scope. But that's a good point he has. If you need to get them specifically, you can dip down into those request headers, get the cookie header, and do your own poking at it with a stick.
Yep, exactly. And he has nice little code to map over the list and, set them all up. Because basically, like you said, they're one big cookie string.
It would, I hate to use phrases like it would be better, because better is probably subjective. If I were to do this, I would actually get the servlet request object from the page context, and I would probably use its methods to get the cookies, which is probably some stupid collection or iterable or something in Java. Which is already parsed, but still case sensitive, as opposed to rewriting any kind of parsing logic, just since there's always edge cases you might not account for.
That's a good recommendation. When you listen, Ben, there you go.
Yeah, and what he has totally works. I'm just thinking, there's really multiple ways to get to it.
Yeah, but essentially, the cookie scope is limited because of ColdFusion's.
It is. But I always recommend developers understand how cookies are passed to and from the browser. Because I think a lot of times people assume there's a bit more magic than there is, and they're not sure how to troubleshoot it. So, the gist of what Ben's doing is really great because it's focusing in on, how do the cookies really make it to the browser and how do they make it back? And when you understand that, you can trace through and find problems like, oh, yeah, I have two cookies with the same name that my browser's sending. And a lot of times, it seems I run into developers that have problems with cookies and they don't really know how they magically come in from the browser. And it's not that hard. It's right there in the browser debugging. So. Yep. This is good information from Ben.
Yeah, like I said, we've been dealing with a whole bunch of cookies lately, trying to get apps from JavaScript to talk to
I think I know what client project you're talking about, Gavin.
Yes, painful. And mainly because we're just not sure what's going on. It changes day to day.
Good times.
Okay, so we have a few from Wildebrun this week, and one of them is Validate or Fail, Filtering Your Request Collection. So a couple weeks back, he blogged about advantages of validating your request scope versus your model. And he says it's even better to validate both of them. So if you validate your request scope using validate or fail, it'll actually return you a cleaned up request scope. So your RC scope that you pass into the validate or fail, it'll only give you back the keys you're actually validating. And so you can use that to then populate your model, and you're even better. So this basically walks through that process. And
to be clear, this is in the context of the CB validation module for the ColdBox MVC framework, right?
Correct. Yeah, sorry.
Got it.
Yep. Thanks for being clear. So yeah. So as you can see here, the validated object are all the structure fields that were validated. So they did have a question about this though with me the other day, talking about nulls versus empty strings and if they're valid or not, and it was pretty interesting. But yeah, so this blog post goes through that endpoint, sort of showing you how to go and validate your fields and how the RC scope can be cleaned up. But it's part of what we did in the Fluent API presentation I did a few months back, and did a webinar on it too. But yeah, it's a good blog post. Thanks for sharing that, Will.
Very nice.
And then he has two on CF compile as well. So
to the rescue.
Yeah. So basically, in this one here, CF compile to the rescue part 2. The short of it is CF compile is a little module that Pete Freitag built in Command Box.
Yeah, I know what prompted this because I saw his Lucee ticket he created on this.
Yeah. So, long story short, sometimes you get this really weird error from Lucee, and it looks like this. Expression and statement cannot be cast to, tag component. And he says it's about as useful as your average Hibernate error message, and he's correct. Sometimes it shows file names and line counts, but a lot of times it doesn't. Even with debugging information, you can not see that.
most compilation errors, you have to look at the tag stack, and if you're lucky, that will tell you, but not always.
Yeah, and so that's where the CF compile module comes in, because if you got one of those weird errors, it can help you look and try and figure out, does it compile? If it doesn't, what didn't compile? And so much
Yeah,
better.
I mean, because it can be as simple as just a missing semicolon, like he says. But the error message doesn't always make it clear even what CFC is in reference to, let alone the line number. And that can leave you just staring at your screen with this really generic error. And maybe you have hundreds of files, thousands of files in your app, and you have no clue which one the error even happened in.
So I don't know if you read this or not, but look in this little bit of code right here, Brad. Can you see the error?
There's not a semicolon after the return. Oh no, he has 2 colons. Is that the error?
Well, that could be one of the errors. That is one thing, but he was having issues where if the component's curly brace was not on the same line, it would actually give that weird error. And so CF format was formatting his code and putting, if he had attributes for component, it was putting the
CF format,
the opening curly brace from the component on the next line, and it works most of the time. It looks like it's fine. There's no problem anywhere except for it get that weird error. And so he gets through this, and that's the short of it, though. Basically, he had 150 components, and CF format would format his code like this if he had multiple lines, and that would basically be the problem.
Did he put in a ticket for the actual parsing error?
Well, he said if you put the CF component stuff on the same line, it would at least give you the line number. So that was
well, no, I'm curious if he put in a ticket for the actual bug of the syntax error when the curly brace isn't in the same line. I'm looking at the actual ticket he put in. The ticket he put in was 3060 2 days ago. Get component metadata does not show error details. Yeah. Okay, so he does use that as an example in his ticket description. Honestly, I think this deserves 2 tickets. 1 ticket for the parsing, the fact that it doesn't parse correctly, and another ticket for the fact that when it doesn't parse correctly, the error message sucks. I mean, they're obviously related, but what I'm afraid will happen with things like this is, the ticket will be quote fixed end quote with okay, it no longer errors with parsing, but you're like, okay, but did you improve the error message for when there is an error like this? Oh no, we didn't do that, which is why I say 2 tickets are good.
Yeah, and he says it's just an error in the get component metadata, so everything else works fine. It's just
and that's not even right, because get component metadata should be able to parse the same things that just creating a component does.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing, because it only came up when Wirebox was using it, trying to get metadata, and so yeah.
Yeah, because Wirebox uses that behind the scenes, and obviously, if you're not familiar, get metadata you can pass a CFC instance into. But get component metadata allows you to pass a string, which is the dot notation passed to the CFC, which then behind the scenes just instantiates an instance of the CFC and then gets the metadata out of it. So of course, compiling it as necessary.
Yeah, and so the first part of that series, the CF Compile the Rescue 1, gives you a little more about how to install the CF compiler and how to use it, and what type of output it gives you, and how to go about finding the problem and fixing it. So yeah, so he says until he improves his touch typing skills and keeps the cat away from his keyboard, CF Compile is going to be his friend.
Keep the cats away from the keyboard.
Yeah. Okay, so you also had a blog post.
I did. You tried to wipe it out of the database, but it came back. The cat came back.
Yep, sure did.
Yeah, apologies anybody tried to read the blog post and got an error on my blog. Had a little server snafu, but it's all there. It's all there. So we talked a couple weeks ago. Was it 2 weeks ago that we talked about this?
Yeah, we talked 2 weeks ago. I think Eric and I talked a little bit about it last week for you.
Okay, yeah. I'd been talking on Twitter about the sort of horrible query performance in Lucee, and Gert and Misha have always just kind of told people, oh yeah, it performs horribly, just don't use it. And it always just assumed that meant we tried as hard as we could and it can't be made any faster. But we had a client with some code that ran pretty much great in Adobe ColdFusion, and their attempts to migrate to Lucee had certain pages in their app that would call over 1,000 queries in one page, and the page was just crawling. And when they threw load at the server, just 2 or 3 users concurrently hitting the page, the server would just crash. And so, in looking at it, we found some significant issues with how Lucee does queries. The biggest one is that Lucee has 3 different query implementations internally. And there's the great thing, and I use great in quotes with sarcasm, is you have no clue which one's being used because they're all just wrapped in try catches. And if one errors, Lucee just shrugs, discards the error, and moves on to the next implementation, just hoping that, maybe it will work better. So Lucee would try to do, an in-memory query for you. And if it failed, it would fall back on this HyperSQL database that it would access via JDBC, which worked for the most part, but it has about a minimum 20 millisecond overhead just for the JDBC mechanisms of it. And you multiply that times 1,000 queries on a page, and suddenly you have 20 seconds worth of just JDBC overhead. So I was complaining and whining 2 weeks ago how I wish I had the time to to dig in and try to fix Lucee's native query implementation. And so after I was in the podcast last week, I met with the client. And I showed him this is this is what's happening. This is why Lucee is so doggone slow with queries. And and I tiptoed around it by simplifying all of his queries to not use any aggregate functions, not use any group by statements, and do it all in ColdFusion. And it worked and was a lot faster. But he said I've got tons and tons of reports in this app I'm converting. And I don't want to spend the time to rewrite all of them to not use queries. So we decided that we'd actually just put some hours into trying to see if we could fix Lucee's query. And I pinged Misha and I said, if I do this, will you merge it? And he said, if you write tests for it, sure. So the proof will be in the pudding if it gets merged. It is not merged yet, but I have sent a massive pull request. I say massive. I didn't touch as many files as the Undertow pull request. I've sent a pull request to Lucee that basically kind of completely revamped its query support. It supports natively without the HyperSQL fallback, group by, having much better distinct, all the aggregate functions, and it's all just a native implementation. And I tested the ever-loving crap out of it. So I have a whole new bundle of tests I added to Lucee's test suite that hits all these scenarios. Scott Steinbeck helped me do testing, Zach Spitzer helped me do testing. And the best thing is it's wicked fast. So not only is it faster than Lucee previously in every single test, it's actually faster now than Adobe ColdFusion 2018 update 10 in 6 out of 8 of the tests. So hopefully I can get Misha to look at this and merge it into the core, because if so, they won't have an excuse to tell people, oh, don't use queries, it's slow, because it won't be slow. It'll actually be faster than Adobe. So
yeah, I mean, it was pretty crazy. Some of the speeds. I mean, I was looking through one of the graphs. I thought one of your graphs was broken as I was just scrolling through for everyone to look at. But it was so small that it only showed the number.
That's the graph with the top 5. So when you have a select statement with no distinct, no group by, and no order by, and there's a top, you can do an early return where after you've grabbed the first 5 records, you can just exit out. And apparently Adobe in the previous Lucee implementation weren't doing that. And so my test has 30,000 rows. So my test is doing 30,000 rows. And you can see that the old Lucee implementation is just horrid because it's falling back to HyperSQL. That's all about JDBC overhead. Adobe's implementation there in yellow wasn't bad, but I optimized what I did enough to where it could do those early returns and say, oh, I have 5 records. I'm not ordering. I'm not grouping. I'm not distincting. Okay, I'm done here. And yeah, it was 9 milliseconds for 100 executions of it
versus 6,344 for the old Lucee and 853 for Adobe.
And what's sad about that is the old Lucee, if you keep that graph up for a second, about 6 solid seconds of that is purely JDBC overhead, hitting that stupid HyperSQL database behind
and
the
loading
scenes.
30,000 records into it so it can just do a
Exactly.
top 5.
And you'll notice I have synchronous and asynchronous testing, and I did that on purpose because the old Lucee implementation, whenever it hits HyperSQL, the entire thing's single threaded. So only one query can run at a time, which is just mind-bogglingly horrendous because you can see that asynchronicity does nothing for performance in Lucee, which means multiple people hitting your site at the same time are all just going to be conflicting each other. So, Adobe at least got faster when you ran it multiple times in threads, but all those Lucee lines in the graph that fall back to HyperSQL, you can see that running the queries in concurrently has almost zero benefit because they're all single threaded internally, which is just why it performs so horrendously.
Yep. So,
Anyway,
that's
I can
an
talk all
awesome
day
blog
about that.
post. Lots of great graphs, pictures. It's even got some
Wait,
words for those who read.
if you want to test it, I have 2 Lucee core files at the bottom of the blog post. One, which is Lucee 536 with my code applied to it, and the other one, which is the 538 snapshot with my code applied to it. So if you want to play around with it, you can download those core files. You can drop them in your patches folder, and you can try out my code. And please report any bugs you find. There's a couple of JVM args you can enable that'll actually reveal those hidden error messages that are normally just discarded by Lucee. I hate it when it does that. So if you're using Lucee and you're like, hey, I wonder if this works with my stuff, I did tons of parser fixes and all kinds of crap. Please give it a test. I have the compiled core files you can drop in, enable those JVM args so you know if it's blowing up, and ping me if you have any problems. So moving on.
Yep, let's move on. We're a little slow today. We're talking.
I know. So much stuff to talk about.
So Ben Adele is also following up on his previous thing about Lucee. When you're threading and you have uploaded files, I guess Lucee duplicates all those files for each of your threads, and then it doesn't delete them when you're done. So that's not cool. So he was using his K8 operational readiness probe to be able to clean up afterwards, but he wanted to do that in Lucee too. So he actually was talking to Zach Spitzer. Zach's really helpful from the Lucee team for this type of stuff. But basically talking about how Lucee already has a background process that monitors the get temp directory contents and deletes temporary files once one of the 2 conditions are true. And until one of the 2 conditions is true. There are less than 100,000 files, or there are less than 1 gig's worth of files in aggregate. And so,
I think I was checking that a while back. I'm trying to remember if it actually deletes the oldest files first, or if it just starts deleting random files when it.
Yeah, well, I know is that Ben found errors, so it was running once per hour or something, but the task was failing, so he was failing it. So this sort of walks through the process of that, and why it's failing and everything. So yeah, so
good old-fashioned try catches wrapped around everything with nothing in the catch block. Gotta love it.
Yeah, so basically he goes through the process of explicitly deleting temporary upload files in the background, deleting the older files, if it's more than 15 minutes. So did he put a
ticket in for the bug that it doesn't automatically delete the temporary upload files in a thread? I'm scrolling through here and I don't actually see that he put a bug in, because I assume that's actually... Well,
it wasn't working for that, so I'm wondering if there's what the conditions are that it doesn't work. So, yeah.
What I understood, because I skimmed through this blog post a while back, what I understood, and I could have been wrong, was that if you upload stuff outside of a thread, then the temp file is removed. But if you did it inside of a thread, it wasn't.
Correct. Yeah. But then
that sounds like a bug in Lucee, which is why I'm curious.
Oh, I think in the previous blog post, I think he did have a ticket for that.
See, when did he post this? September 10th?
Yeah, so this other one was September the 6th. So let me see. Did he post a ticket?
I'm actually scrolling through an internal Lucee Slack right now, but it has all the tickets to come in to see if I see a ticket.
No, I don't see it listed, but maybe I missed it.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, the ticket was put in September 6th. It's LDev 3041.
Yep.
Temporary upload files persisted indefinitely when using CF thread. Okay, so ticket's in. It's actually looked like it's been triaged, and it's in the backlog. So, yep, Potheus already has a reproducible case for it. It looks like. Sweet.
Yeah, I guess there was another thing when it's in parallel too. So there's 2903 that Daymark had found. I guess it's another similar, but not. Yeah, the array each duplicates the upload files in every loop too, crashing servers. So that was the array each.
That's probably because of all the stupid freaking cloning of the entire page context, which includes the servlet request thing, which includes all the upload stuff. Ugh.
Yep, exactly.
That's why I hate that so much.
Yep.
I hate it, Gavin.
Exactly. That's probably why that one got fixed as well, because this blog post that Ben wrote brought attention to that. So
there we go.
Okay, here's a quick little one from Pete Freitag, but still interesting. Now, I bet you knew about this, but we'll see.
I do, because it's my code. It's my code he saw it in.
Oh, okay. The CFML left and right functions can accept negative counts. And I love this. I was
Yeah,
actually doing something for my wife today in Excel, and I
if you look
wish
at
they
that
had
sum
it.
code link, that's actually a link to the command box code. That's
Oh,
where you
okay.
saw it.
Yeah, I didn't see that. But yeah,
Yeah.
so if you want to do a left and you want to take I just want the first 5 characters of a name, you have to do, okay, left of the string and then 5. But if you want to take 1 character off of it, you usually have to do the length and -1. But if you just do -1, now in Lucee and even Adobe, which I didn't think worked in Adobe for a while, or maybe
Yeah, it was added recently.
yeah, so if you do left the string and then -1, it'll take the length -1. And so you don't have to worry about doing the math or doing, length of the string again -1. It'll do it for you. Same thing for right, and I don't know if did it work for mid. That was the one question I always wondered. Like, do it take so much off each side?
I don't think it would make any sense to use it with mid.
Yeah, I know there was a use case or an edge case where that didn't work, but I think now in Adobe and Lucee they both work the same way. But he does warn that if you have the minus number being bigger than the actual string or something like that, you can get all sorts of weird errors or just weird things happening too.
I think instead of throwing an exception, it just did something unexpected. So maybe some missing validation.
Yep. So it's a pretty cool little snippet. Like you said, you knew about it. I've used it before. I like it, and I wish Excel had it too because I was doing some stuff with that today.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many times I've had to use, right or left or mid, and nested inside of it you have, my string dot length -2 or something like that. So it kind of just simplifies those examples.
Yep. Okay, and next up we have one from Steve Bryant. And so this one's implementing the observer pattern in ColdFusion with observer.cfc. So apparently he didn't find any implementation that he liked or loved, so he decided to just try his hand at it with an observer.cfc. So I always like these patterns. I always think I could learn a little more about design patterns, and I've actually got some of my old university books where we did the Gang of Five and stuff like that, and so I feel like getting them out and reading them sometimes. But that's one of the things I like about all the Ortus guys. You always use design patterns, and I learn a few things. So, but this blog post is his sort of process of walking through it here. So
basically, what he's done is rebuilt ColdBox interceptors. If you use the ColdBox MVC framework, you just use an interceptor, and it does this.
Yep, he has even an ounce event, same name.
Yeah, I even noticed that it's very similar. But I mean, Luis copied a lot of, Luis has a book on the J2EE design patterns, and a lot of the stuff in ColdBox is just straight off the shelf design patterns, and even the names of methods and things follow the standard. So it's very recognizable.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't very many times where we at Ortus just come up with some crazy idea and just do it. We always research other languages and frameworks and see how they do it and see if our idea is actually a good way to do it or not. So
Ryan Gill also did sort of an observable thing called emit, which was a copy of a JavaScript library, just for what it's worth, in the same topic, the CFML event emitter. I think it was a bit more functional in how it works, as he was copying some JavaScript stuff. But yeah, if you just Google CFML emit, you can find Ryan Gill's thing. Or just use ColdBox and it's baked in.
Yep, sounds good to us.
Or just use ColdBox.
Okay, so next up, we have Find a Job, because we're done with our blog posts for the week. There's quite a few this week. Yeah. So next up, our CFML jobs. So if you go to getcfmljobs.com, you'll see there's 22 listings over 14 companies across 10 locations in 5 countries, even though this week's ones all come from other countries, which I thought was interesting. So I guess I don't have a name on that one.
Other countries. Does it actually just say that on a listing?
Yeah. So I mean,
maybe they just didn't put it in.
I'm assuming it's German.
Oh, Munich, comma other countries.
Is it Munich or München? Maybe.
Oh well, München is how you say Munich in German.
Yeah.
It's probably maybe they allow remote work, and so there's if you live in another nearby country, maybe.
Yeah, and this is for the Contents CMS, right?
Contents, yeah.
Contents. Yep. So obviously German is probably recommended for that, but
Even if you want to read the posting, German's recommended.
yep. But if you go to getcfmljobs.com, you can see. So they're looking for a full stack web developer. I like how the name is, instead of a web developer, it's a web Entwickler.
Entwickler.
A cloud engineer and a project manager. So there are 4 positions open there. Good to see some more jobs, and yeah, it's good to see other countries too. So previously we had some from India, Canada, United States, Australia. So must be one of the new ones. So, and Michael Dinowich just said if the job's good enough, he'll move. So go check it out. There's 4 of them there. One of them's got to work. So got some good postings there.
How's your German, Michael?
It's got to be better than mine. Also, we have some a couple positions up with Ortus Solutions as well. So if you go to ortussolutions.com/about-careers, you'll see we have a senior ColdFusion developer position. And then we actually have a couple...
Senior, as we say.
Yeah, and we have a couple in El Salvador too. So if you're in the El Salvador area and you'd like to work there, let us know. But this one's basically a remote position. This one is U.S. time zone availability is a must. With U.S. citizen resident work visa is a must too. So apart from that, we got a lot of things we'd like you to have. Not a lot of things you need to have, but do a lot of fun projects with Ortus. A lot of help a lot of companies move out of legacy hell, as we like to put it. Help them modernize so they don't die, because that's not fun. So
legacy Hades.
Yep. So check that out if you guys are interested as well, and go from there. Okay, so next up we have our ForgeBox module of the week. So this is a new one actually by the Ortus team.
Brand new, hot off the presses. It's still steaming.
Yeah, I think it's actually people are asked to try this one out and let us know what you find, because it's so fresh. Yeah, I mean it's just in the repo a couple of days ago.
It appears it's so fresh that the build script is messed up, and the current stable build is @build.version @+@build.number .
Yeah, it's
I think they're still tweaking the build script right now.
Yep, but the new module is Logstash. So this module provides a common interface for sending Logstash logs to Elasticsearch.
We've been talking about making this one for a while, right?
Yep, and then I think the next one out is Stash Cache or something. Stash box maybe. I'm not sure, but we're definitely loving the stashes, and. Yeah, this one's kind of cool that you can basically throw your logs into Elasticsearch now. And so you could be installed as a client-only module, and that connects to a separate service, or it could be actually built into the Elasticsearch server itself with a direct connection. So
there's a huge README on here that covers all sorts of usage. So check it out.
Yep, brand new. Like you say.
Right. And I think we owe this to Mr. John Clausen.
Yeah,
as well.
He's been working hard on that. So the source code is up there. Check it out. Start testing. If you got any questions, reach out to John. But yeah, as you said, the pretty well documented. Lots of options and settings in there as well. But yeah, very cool. I know we've got a couple clients that who like using Logstash, and so we had to build it. Just keep building up the library. So yeah, so that's a new module. Go check it out, try it out, and give us some feedback too. We'd like to try and make it better and get that out to production. So I know, like I said, we have a couple of customers that are using it. If we got some more eyes on it, I'm sure John will appreciate that. Okay, so next up on our list, our VS Code hint, tip, and trick of the week is nggrok for VS Code. So nggrok is a pretty cool way for tunneling into your machine when you're sharing projects or whatnot, and we have some built into command box directly. So we have a command box module for nggrok.
It's not nggrok, it's ngrok or ngrok, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know.
I've never heard anybody else say it. I've always just said it inside my head. So.
Yeah, it probably is nggrok. I don't know. I don't
know if I've ever said it right or not, to be honest.
I probably never have. I don't say much right, apparently.
But you say stuff fun, Gavin, and that's what's important.
Yeah, sure. So, but yeah, you've got the ngrok or whatever control panel, so the command palette can pop up and you can start a tunneling point, and it gives you a nice little URL so you can use it. But the cool thing is it automatically generates the URL for you to share. But now, instead of having to use it in command box, you can use it directly from VS Code. And so you copy from the clipboard, and then you can paste it. And it can even generate a QR code, so if you're on a mobile device, you can just scan it, which is pretty cool.
Oh, that's kind of clever. We need to add that into the command box version of it.
You should.
The command box module, which I think Eric Peterson wrote, is you start a server and you can just type server share start, and it does the same thing. It spins up the ngrok tunnel or whatever.
Yep.
But yeah, the QR code is kind of clever.
Yeah, I like it. And then here, obviously, you can stop one tunnel or all tunnels. And there's also a dashboard to check out all your ngrok stuff. So pretty nice. Neat. A couple of configurations, and then but nice little project. And again, just another little helpful tool as a developer, straight inside VS Code now. So
pretty soon, we're just going to do everything in VS Code. Like the Google Chromebooks, whereas like the entire operating system is just Chrome. Pretty soon it's going to be the VS Code book, and it's just the entire operating system's VS Code, and there's literally an extension for anything you could ever do. Just take over the operating system.
So Charlie is looked up the FAQ, and it's pronounced ngrok, because grok is to understand in.
Yeah, if you grok something. What was it? Adam Tuttle? Who was it that had the ColdFusion Grokker? Was their name on Twitter or something?
Yeah, I think.
Remember that?
I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Adam Tuttle did have.
Somebody used to have that.
Pretty sure that was him. Okay, so next up on our list, luckily for everybody else, it's the last thing on our list. We're going to thank our Patreon supporters. So as we mentioned, we have 31 supporters now, and we're doing pretty well, but there's still room for more support. Obviously, the main thing that the Patreon goes through right now is the podcasts that we have, and we'd like to build those up. And also, once we've passed that amount, we'll set our next goals for things like CommandBox, ForgeBox, ColdBox, TestBox, and all the other open source projects that we have. So obviously, Patreon is a great way for you to financially support our projects. We also take tickets, issues, pull requests, documentation, a lot of different ways you can help us. But we also want to just thank those personally on the podcast for all those Patreon supporters that are using their hard-earned dollars to help us out. So we thank you. Is it your turn, Brad, or is it my turn?
I don't know whose turn it is, but I can do it.
Go for it.
All right, here's our current list of Patreon supporters. Big thanks to Ben Liddell, Brett DeLine, Carl Von Stetten, Charlie Earhart, Dali, Dan Carr, Daniel Garcia, David Bellinger, Didier Lesnicki, Don Bellamy, Eric Hoffman, Gary Knight, Giancarlo Gomez, Jan Yannick, Jason Theiger, Jeff McLean, Jeremy Adams, Jonas Erickson, Jordan Clark, Joseph Lamery, Kai Koenig, Lakshma Tirutardi. I always say that wrong. Tirutardi? You always say it better, Gavin. I always mess that one up. Mario Rodriguez, Matthew Clemente, Mingo Hagen, Ryan Hughes, Scott Steinbeck, Sean Oden, Stephen Klotz, Snaptrix, and Yogesh Mathur. Thank you so much for you guys' support.
Yeah, and if you go to ortusolutions.com/about-us/sponsors, you can see all of those, and they're pretty pitches as well. And we'll definitely be looking for more support there. It's good to see the new ones come in. We get excited every time we have a new supporter. So go to patreon.com/ortusolutions and pledge a few bucks to help us today. We appreciate it.
Every time we get a new Patreon supporter, an angel gets his wings.
Something like that. Well, thanks for sticking around, guys. It's a long episode, but a lot of good stuff there today. So thanks for joining me, Brad, and we'll see everybody next week.
Adios, everybody.
Bye. Show notes for this episode can be found at cfmlnews.modernize.io, where you can also subscribe to your favorite podcast player like Spotify or iTunes. We also have the link to YouTube to find more videos just like this. The music used in this podcast is under a royalty-free license from Sound.com and Blue Tree Audio.